So without further ado, please help me welcome our first presenter, Linda Frank with IWT Health. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Can I click? Good morning. I'm Linda Frank, CEO of IWT Health. And I do have with me over on the side here Bernie Hogan, our Chief Visionary and Founder. So we're really excited to be here. Thank you for welcoming us in, and we really look forward to getting your feedback. What we'll cover today, let's see, the clicker did not work. There we go. Is a little bit about the company, and then we have a couple of questions for you that we'll put out there right away so you can think about it. And then we'll talk about our By Your Side app, which is our main focus. And then lastly, the Q&A. Okay, so IWT Health, our mission is to develop software that can change the face of healthcare. Together, Bernie and I have over 40 years of experience in this field. We've developed numerous software applications, most notably a touch-based electronic health record system. We have 40 customers using our software throughout the US and Canada. Now, we just opened a new company here in Florida, IWT Health, and we have an office that we've just opened right here in the Innovation Incubator. And our focus is going to be here on the By Your Side application, and it arose out of the pandemic, and we believe will be beneficial to the Ocala community. So this app provides for instant communication between patients and their loved ones by utilizing mobile communication, video communication. And hopefully it will solve the problem of isolation and loneliness and bring families together. So we need your ideas though, so if you could keep these in mind as we go through the presentation. The first is, how do we position this in the marketplace? Where is the greatest need for it? And then secondly, how do we get 2 to 5 pilots going so that we can get feedback in real life? I want to start by telling you a story. This is our good friend Tom and his father, who was 94 years old and lived in a lockdown unit in a memory care facility. Tom visited him regularly before the pandemic, but when the pandemic struck, he was locked out, obviously, and no longer allowed to visit. And then 3 weeks into the pandemic, his dad contracted COVID and had to be hospitalized. And of course, he still couldn't visit there. So sadly, 11 days of COVID, he only got to see his dad twice on a phone, and that was with the help of a nurse, excuse me, a nurse who used her own personal cell phone to facilitate a FaceTime session. And then unfortunately, his dad did pass away without Tom ever getting to see him in person. So that's what started our By Your Side idea. Okay. So now imagine Tom's story with By Your Side. Tom could use the app on his smartphone, and with a single button push, could initiate a video call to his dad. On his dad's side, there's probably some kind of a tablet device mounted to his bedside, which is critical, right? Because dad can't even pick up the phone. He's so sick now. Dad doesn't have to do anything to accept this call. As long as he doesn't reject it, then it's going to automatically connect, and Tom's going to pop in on his dad, just as if he were there personally and walked in the room. So I know you're wondering a couple things. First of all, what if Dad's on the bedpan when Tom wants to pop in? Well, there's a privacy feature that can be evoked by the staff or the patient that will block incoming calls for a period of time. And then your other question I know is, well, why do we need By Your Side? Why not Zoom or FaceTime or one of the others? Well, there's challenges to that, right? If you're someone like Tom's dad, he could never have made that happen. And in fact, anyone who's physically or cognitively challenged would not be able to manage a Zoom or FaceTime. I want to explore with you some ideas outside of acute care. So we're talking about hospitalization here, but would this also help in a skilled nursing facility or an assisted living community for seniors, or even in an ambulatory care setting, say the cancer care journey that a patient might have to go through? And then what about outside of healthcare? Is there maybe even some opportunities for this pop-in video communication? So I know this is horse country. So what if you were to install a device in your thoroughbred's horse stall and you could pop in and check on him at any time?
Oh,
We'd love to hear your ideas.
that's a good idea.
Okay, so there's also benefits to the care team. So right now, we're talking to a hospital that has 5 people that do nothing but run around and facilitate Zoom sessions between patients and families. The alternative is what Tom experienced, right, where they actually have to pull a nurse off of nursing care and gown up, go in the room and use her personal cell phone to make the call happen. And this takes time for the nurse too, right? She has to gown and ungown every time she goes into an isolation room, and she has to use precious PPE supplies. Instead, couldn't the nurse pop in and check on her patients remotely using a By Your Side application? She wouldn't have to be going in the room, she wouldn't have to gown and ungown. And then finally, what about using it for bedside communication? So a doctor in his office could pop in on a patient to initiate a discharge process. Or what about a family conference? So you've got the patient and the family and the pertinent members of the care team to get together for a family conference. So we think there's a lot of different uses for this. So for those of you who like the technical details, this is the slide for you. I'm not going to go through it point by point for brevity's sake, but I did want to touch on a couple things. The first of which is, it's an app that you can download from the Android or Apple store. And it also is able to run in any kind of browser and on most kind of devices. The second thing is security is very important in healthcare. It's fully HIPAA compliant. It does require user authentication, and it does have a process for authorizing the association of patients with their loved ones. So you can't just pop in on anyone. All right, let's move into the wrap up. So you've heard how By Your Side can mitigate isolation and loneliness, and you saw how Tom and his dad might have benefited from it if they had had it. And I'm sure you guys have some similar experiences. We'd love for you to share them with us and let us know if you think By Your Side would or wouldn't have helped in that scenario. So we're going to move into Q&A. We have our questions up here again that we really are hoping to get your feedback on, and then we are here to answer any of your questions. I'm going to ask Bernie to come up with me as well, because I know he'll be able to answer some questions that I cannot.
Great job. Great job. Very good. Well, I want to start with a couple compliments. Tristan had already said this is such a great thing. This is exciting. 1 Million Cups. Nice to see innovation in bedside care. Mary Lou says you can go talk about your chocolate business. That would fit the criteria, like a mini Shark Tank, but more friendly. Back to 1 Million Cups. And then Lisa says, love the idea. Jan says, can you discuss hardware needs to implement? Like, what kind of hardware do you need?
Literally, you need an Android or iOS device typically at the bedside. So it doesn't matter what it is, tablet, you name it, cell phone, even iPad, pick one, doesn't make any difference. And then for the remote communications, any cell phone's fine, but it has a camera and a mic on it. Or if you have a PC that has a web browser on it with a camera and a mic, it's good, that works fine also.
And there's no servers required. It's hosted in the cloud.
No, nothing.
Is the data, or I guess, go ahead. I'm thinking my question.
That's all right. Think about that, because you're on the right track. Have you considered making this a standalone unit or an extension arm, just like you showed in the picture? That way, I mean, I have, my grandmother had a flip phone, okay? She recently passed away with COVID and pneumonia, and I would have paid anything to have some video, something in that room, because we weren't allowed to visit her. So have you thought about something that can be stationary at every single bedside, that could go into every room in the hospital, to where you'd have this type of access?
Definitely. We actually use that for a high-end connection. We actually use the same mount that Epic uses with their Epic bedside. So it's basically a little clamp thing, clamps on there, and it locks the iPad in place. That's an excellent choice. For in some of the home care things, there's some less expensive ones that will just clamp onto a table. We have mounts that will mount on a wall, like you just want to put it on a wall somewhere. And we also have for those units like where they're kind of just trying to share devices, we have like an IV pole looking thing. It's got wheels and runs around with an iPad on it, and a little battery attached to it. So you can use it with multiple people. If you just wanted to say, oh, they need a conference, we'll just wheel it in there, log that person in, and they can use it, and then they can wheel it to the next room.
And that might also be an option for assisted living where you've got someone who can't get into their phone all the time, but they can move this from spot to spot, so bed to chair, kitchen table, whatever.
That's awesome. And in assisted and independent living, you could almost, you could put together like a little schedule. You could let the family know, hey, we're looking to connect at certain times throughout the day or the week, and then they could roll that into that unit or into their room depending on their level of accessibility.
Yes.
Mary Lou says, have you reached out to long-term and assisted facilities and hospitals already?
We're starting. Our background is acute care hospitals. That's where we grew up in, doing clinical alerting, real-time alerts, keeping patients safe. That's what my background is. So the long-term care, we don't have very many contacts, but we have met some really wonderful people down here. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, and I think there's opportunity for video in a lot of other areas. Like one of the things that people are sometimes afraid of is like remote workers. Could you imagine using this on their desk so you could actually just pop in on them? So, so there's a lot of other spots I think we could use. We need those ideas.
Very good. Now, it says the hardware, or the question from Jan is, does the hardware have to be left at the bedside and tuned into the app? Does the app have to be on to be able to be popped in?
So on the pop-in, yes. Typically, the app is made, you log into it once, and that's it. It stays on forever. And then it needs to be in the foreground. Now, for the remote ones, like if the patient was calling outbound to you, it'll act like it'll ring your phone like a phone call, and you can answer it. If the app is open and ready, so let's say you have somebody in memory care at a long-term facility doesn't really know how to use much of this, then they just have a picture of a loved one. And what about the wife at home that doesn't really, not very technology savvy, right? You can have her just log into the app, walk her through getting on the app, and then when they touch it, it'll auto-connect on the remote side too.
Yeah, that's a good point. A lot of the family members are tech challenged.
Yes.
Most hospital rooms have a fairly large screen television at each bed. Could you interface a camera with that already existing hardware?
We've looked at some of that. The trouble with it is that with the existing hardware, it kind of have to be open and dedicated to that area. So you don't want to let them watch TV and other things. It can definitely run on those, but there's some downsides.
So like when someone's using an iPad for this software, it's like dedicated just for that at their bedside.
Pretty much, it's a dedicated app.
Accessibility wise, is it voice? Like, can they use their voice to like maybe turn on that privacy setting if they don't want to be bothered, or do they have to?
We haven't gotten to voice yet, but a lot of our other applications use voice. We actually use the Alexa app a lot.
Very cool. I love the idea of adding voice to it, just because then you could have that accessibility.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tim.
Tim, you had a question?
So we've talked about this before. Have you considered so pricing, obviously that's something that people are, and I'm not going to ask you to commit to a price, but and Daniel expressed this, I would have paid anything to be able to spend some time with my grandmother, if only just to be able to see and communicate. And my mom has been in lockdown, I love that word, in assisted living and not in my assisted living for the last year. And my only time to see her is when she was at the hospital, when I was allowed to visit with memory care. Sometimes it was hard. I've also had employees who spent countless hours trying to connect family members, only to walk away and the loved one touches the screen and we've lost connection with Puerto Rico or Michigan or wherever they are. Mm-hmm. What are some of the challenges that you have faced, and that this is better than FaceTime and Zoom and those other options? Tell me a little bit more about that and how that can really help people? Because it's really about the passion of people being connected to their loved one.
Well, this is where it all started. It really started with Tom, my friend, who helps us, and we already had an application that you share, the electronic whiteboard, like in the room with the patients. So what happened from there is we already had that platform, the security and stuff together. So it was fairly straightforward to add video to it. So let me talk a little bit about some of the differences between like FaceTime and Zoom and some of those things. Zoom, a lot of hospitals are using Zoom. The challenge with that, you have to go through the same thing, getting them downloaded, but you also have to schedule it and send them a link and how they get their email, and it just gets way complicated for even me when I was in the hospital. I had a resident in the hospital for about a week, and you're just tired, you just don't feel like it. It's just hard to do. So you have that part, and then if you have somebody that's unconscious or memory care and those type of
Like
things.
Tom's dad.
Yeah, like Tom's dad, you're lucky to get them to pick up the phone the right way, if they even have one. So those are some of the major differences.
All right, next question. Lisa says, is the app fully operational at the moment?
It is fully operational today at the moment. We haven't deployed yet anywhere. We have just beta or alpha users using it with their personal loved ones.
Gotcha, very good. Tristan says, have you thought about putting it in ICUs and children's hospitals?
Yes, I would love that. This whole thing came from the heart.
Yep.
We had no business model, to be honest with you. None. All we did is people were isolated. I was in the hospital, and not having somebody with me to help me with the meds and those type of things would have been devastating. I almost died twice in the hospital. They overcoagulated
Too
me.
much information.
Exactly.
No.
And,
It's,
terrible.
you can tell the passion. It's very
That's
powerful.
where it is. So we wanted
So,
to
but
be-
we definitely, this hospital that we're talking to in North Carolina wants to start with the ICU, so
That's awesome.
that's a big one, and there's definitely gonna wanna talk about pediatrics as well.
Love it. I'm gonna hit you with two questions. Jan wants to know the cost to the facilities, and Hunter was saying, what is the cost to use the app itself?
Yes,
So-
I'm glad we really need input on this. We don't have a pricing model yet. What we'd like to do ideally is not charge the individuals for it if we can help it, or at least not the patients. Maybe the families, like in a skilled nursing facility, the families, it might be worth it to them to invest a little money in this. We know there's gonna be some people who can't afford it, so we've also spun up a not-for-profit here in Florida that we're hoping we can do some donating with services with.
Wow.
But we're not, obviously we need to make some money on it so that we can keep developing it further, and as Bernie always says, our programmers like to be fed. So
I know what you
we do
mean.
need to figure out some way to get some kind of a revenue stream. But right now, we just wanna get it up and running and get those pilots going so we can get.
Gotcha. So out there in Facebook land, if you guys have suggestions on pricing model and just a total suggestion of what would you pay to use this as an app, and then what do you think for my healthcare professionals, and if you're in finance and healthcare as well, what do you think that the budget could afford to have this type of access? It's absolutely amazing. Tim, did you have a question?
Are you ready to roll it out, even in assisted living, memory care, long-term care, hospitals? Are you ready to roll it out to someone other than who you've been using as your testers?
Our QAs and our testers right now have identified just a few bugs, and we are still doing some bug fixes. We are anticipating in the next 2 to 3 weeks, we will be
Ready to
comfortable.
release
With apps like this, I don't have a ton of app experience, but we gotta roll out clean. It's gotta be good from day one. I'd rather tell everybody it's gonna take a little longer and
Absolutely.
roll out a solid app.
Absolutely. So from 1 Million Cups as well, facilities and organization pays, users are free, patient is free, consider tablet leasing program to offset the cost for users.
Yes, we're very interested in that.
Yeah, good idea.
Very
We're
good.
very, very interested in that, because hardware's not our thing. To be honest with you.
That's all right. Okay, so we need a connection to hardware, y'all. So if you're out there in the community and you have connection to hardware, let us know.
Let me add one other thing to that, is assisted living where the family is purchasing it, we need a process for getting it set up and installed for that individual patient or resident.
Very good. Jan says executive directors, administrators of the skilled nursing facilities. I didn't want to say SNFs.
SNFs.
Not everybody knows what that is.
SNFs now.
I've been in that area for many, many years, and ALFs as well, would have to approve the cost and the compliance aspect. So it sounds like there's a little bit of conversations that need to happen and to make all that come to fruition. But I absolutely wish you the best in that. Any other questions in the room before we go to our final question?
Could you share your best contact information to the screen? So website, yourself?
Is
No,
it-
just
It's
say
on
to the
link
camera.
down there at the
It's
bottom. I don't know.
iwthealth.com,
Well, actually, we have the Lion side.
and yeah, by your side at iwthealth.com will work fine too. It says an email address for us.
Okay.
Very good, very good. So our final question, how can we as a community help you with this?
Start with, like, introductions, like Tim was a great introduction to long-term care and those type of facilities. We don't have a lot of contacts in that area. Also giving us information, what else could we use this for? What is the best way for the market? What areas should we target?
Had to do like our horse idea.
Yeah.
That was that was a very good idea.
What if we put one on your horse and you can watch it through the race, right, real time? I don't know.
Plus, you're here in town now, so we'll see you around more and more,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. We now have our office officially here. We're doing really well.
Very
Awesome.
good.
To everybody here.
Well, how about another round of applause for our presenters? Man, I said it in the questions, but I would pay anything. So the question is, how much would you pay? If you have ideas for suggestions on their pricing model, 2 to 3 weeks out from rollout, I'm glad you have bugs in your program. That means that you're fixing things that would have went wrong for somebody else. So you want it to be seamless, especially when it matters most. So amazing presentation, exciting things coming out of 1 Million Cups, and I would absolutely wish you the best of that. So I want to thank you all for joining us for 1 Million Cups Ocala. We'll see you next week, same time, same place. Let's grow the Ocala startup community. Have a good day, guys.